So I got to go over and speak to our middle schoolers. I get to do this once a month and lead their Bible class. And going in today, I had a mindset of what I wanted to talk about, and we'll share a little bit of that. But the teacher said that they'd been talking about attitudes, good and bad. And this really took us off kind of on a tangent, but I love these moments where you go off a little bit of the beaten path, the trail that you thought you wanted to go on, and suddenly you arrive back at this place. You're like, oh, this completely validates what I was going to talk about. So I opened the floor with them to ask them about what they knew about attitudes, to give me some examples of attitudes. And as many of us would, a lot of the attitudes were just bad ones. Like everybody can recognize a bad attitude, right? You know what I'm talking about. You got that person at work every day they walk in, just how did you arrive here? What happened so bad from the moment you opened your eyes till now that this is it? Just wow, you are just a curmudgeon. Like everything is going wrong. I can't imagine what your morning looks like for you to be in such a bad attitude. So as we begin to talk about these attitudes, and in middle schoolers, it's the bad hair day or whatever it is, a bully, things along these lines, where these attitudes can develop. And I decided to look up the word attitude, and I want to share this definition with you because we need to be aware. There's a couple I want to see, because I think the first definition is one that really jumps out and one we've probably assigned to this word: a mental position with regard to a fact or state, or a feeling or emotion toward a fact or state. See, this is where I think a lot of us get stuck in our attitudes, is we identify it as a feeling or an emotion, something that changes, and that may be true very early on. Like you can just have a bad attitude in the morning. Like something really could have happened to you that develops a moment with a bad attitude. But there's too many people that have had moments of bad attitudes that have slowly or maybe quickly developed into a lifestyle of bad attitudes. And I think this goes to the second definition I want to share, and one we need to be very aware of. It says a bodily state of readiness. You don't get to a state of readiness without some training, without some practice. Okay. 21 years in the Navy, we didn't get to a state of readiness without practicing and preparing for what was coming. So, this is when that feeling or emotion begins to shift and change, begins to come a little bit more foundational into who you are. And it's not just a morning of bad attitude, it's a lifetime of bad attitude. A bodily state of readiness to respond in a characteristic way to a stimulus. So, a stimulus is something that generates a response. Okay. And that can be anything. A stimulus can be an object, a concept, or situation. So, it's not a certain one stimulus, but what this attitude concept is talking about is positioning us as a way of response to whatever this changing thing is. And this is where, like, you can have a bad attitude and it doesn't matter what happens to you. I have seen people who have had good things happen to them and they will find a way to justify a bad attitude in the midst of something good. Well, yeah, I know this, I got this, but there's probably an expiration date on it. Probably expecting something in response. It's probably less than what they're saying it is. It's never going to be as good as they say. It's probably a lie anyway. So I don't even want it. So many times their bad attitude will just reject some of the best things. I find so many people who are just negative in life that always think nothing's good's going to happen to them. If they could just like zoom out a little bit to their life, they would realize how many good things they've passed by, left behind, or just merely closed the door, walked away from because of a negative attitude. Like they just rejected it, could not see it, and missed a moment. And then there's other attitudes that I want to address, because I think that one you have to understand. It's to get over a negative attitude, the only way to get through that is to begin to see the good in things. This is hard, right? If you're not used to seeing this, you got these blinders on that says the world's a negative place, negative, negative, blah, blah. Every time I turn the news and all this stuff, and you're just a negative Nancy. Like, sorry if you're a Nancy out there, whatever it is, but just a broken, ugly attitude. The only way to get over that, you have to begin to be very intentional about seeing good. You got to go outside, and it could be the nastiest, rainiest day, and you really got to stop and see that one flower and say, you know what? Without this rain, without this nasty weather, that flower would never have grown. Like it, you really got to be intentional. You got to stretch yourself to begin to overcome for what for many of us has just become commonplace, an identity founded in brokenness. That's the first thing, the negative attitudes. You gotta overcome it. The second attitude I want to approach and talk to is the have to attitude. Now, we think we've heard some, well, I have to do this. And if you're a dad, or you're a husband, or you're a mom, or you're a wife, and you hear, well, I have to go get my kids from school. Well, that's probably a good thing, right? Like, okay, yeah, you need to, because if you don't, somebody else will, or nobody else will, and that could be even worse, I guess. But it all comes with the tense, like the verbiage that's used. Like you can tell it in somebody's voice. Yeah, I'd love to do that, but I have to go get my kids from school. Like then it's a complete shift, right? It's now it's a burden. Now it's an attitude. I'm waiting on everybody around me. Like, I have to do all this. Right? Woe is me. I would love to do all these things. See, even in that moment, you can take something that's good and make it bad. And I think for a lot of people, I just preached this on Sunday here in our church, and I said the difference between, I believe, the church really stepping up and being a positive light to the world around us is the moment that the things we do according to our Christian journey, our walk, according to what the Bible says, is when they stop becoming have tos and they start becoming get tos. Like, think about it from this perspective. I was I came out of a very many of us did. If you were saved in the 80s, 90s, raised in church 80s, 90s, there was a really fear-based movement that moved through society and through the church that when people would come in, like it was hellfire and brimstone, and you have to do this, this, and you come in with a list of have tos, and it really developed a mindset within the church of a have to. And we constantly are trying to do all these things. Well, I have to do this, this, and this to go to heaven. And depending on what you did before you came into church, you may have a very long list of things you have to do. And then you spend every day stuck in this mindset of have to, have to, have to. And you never get to walk in the freedom of I get to. So then what develops oftentimes is based on the teaching we received, based on the church we went to, your have to looks different than my have to. Because theologically, religiously, we have these understandings of the things we have to do. And then we encounter somebody who's different than us that says, no, you have to do this. And we're like, no, I was told I have to do this. So now in this, it really becomes a have to. And because we never understand why we get to. Grace is a big part of this, right? If we don't understand the concept of grace, then we don't understand the true forgiveness that we've been given. And it really shifts a mindset when we understand grace that wow, I get to do this. Like, I could not wake up this morning, but I get to. So now everything I do today, I get to do because I have a breath in my chest, a beat in my lungs, as Morgan often says.